Hi, so we're going to deploy an application gateway path-based routing for Azure VMS. So let's see how to do that. So first of all, let's see the diagram of what we need to do. This is just an illustration on Packet Tracer. We want to create virtual machines which will serve as our servers. We can see virtual machine 1, which will be default server, virtual machine 2, which will be for our project images, and virtual machine 3, which will be for our project videos. So the idea is that we want to have our information or data stored in separate virtual machines, and we want the images and the videos from my projects to be separate from that of the other contents, which will be in the default virtual machine. So we're going to put that in a subnet called backend subnet, BE subnet, and we can see the IP address range that subnet will have. So we also need to create the virtual network, which would encompass the entire subnets that will be within it. And then we'll create the application gateway, which will have the application gateway subnet, which is also within the virtual network. And the idea is that we want to connect the application gateway to have a public IP address, which we'll call AGPIP as AG public IP, and it will be connected to the internet. And so that when the client wants to have access to our application and the client specifies the path, it will be determined by the application gateway where to send the client's request. If the path is the normal default path, then it will go to the default server. If the path is the image path, then it will go to the images server. And if the path is the videos path, it will go to the video server. So let's see how to do this on Azure. So we're back on Azure portal and we can see all our resources is empty. If we go to our resource groups, we have empty, nothing is there. So I'm going to create all the virtual machines which we have here first. That's the 3 of them, and we also create the virtual network and the subnets within the virtual networks. Then when we are done with that and we're done with creating the virtual machines, then we'll create the application gateway on the portal, and then we'll have access to the virtual machine to test it. So we will need to do that on bash terminal. So our bash terminal is open, and now we can type in our commands, that's the Azure commands, to begin to create our labs. But first of all, we need to create the resource group, and all we need to do is AZ group, then create, then we'll give the name of the resource group RG lab 22, and then we would now specify the location, which we will just put there. East US. So I can go ahead to run this and let's see the outcome. And now if we want to confirm our resource group has been created, we'll say RG group list in order and table. And now we can see the resource group RG lab 22 has now been created. For the rest of our commands, I've already set up the commands on my GitHub, and if we go to GitHub, we'll see github.com omeata. That's my GitHub repositories, and we can see Azure commands. So if I go into that, then we go to inside what I have here, that's deploy app gateway, and we can see all of the commands we're going to perform. And down here we have the readme file which specifies each of the commands, like this which we just did now, creating our resource group, and we also were able to list the resource group. and we can see what we'll do next. That's create virtual network with 2 subnets. So I'm going to run this, and since we already have the file in my repository, I'll first of all need to download the Azure commands repository, and then I'll be able to run the files through bash. But let me also show you my Replit account where I was able to connect to the GitHub, and you can see these are my repositories. And let me just click on the Azure commands, and we can see exactly the same we have on our GitHub. And now we can see my bash commands. That's the deploy application gateway, and we can see all of them here I created. But I also have a file all, which would help me run all the commands, and I'll be able to automate the process faster. But in this video, I'm going to take them step by step so that you understand exactly what I'm doing, just as we have here down here. Next, we need to first of all, we need to download the Azure commands repository from GitHub. So I'm going to go back here, and let me just clear that. But let me just list to see what file folder I have, and that's just the cloud drive. So I'm going to now clone from the GitHub, clone my repository, so git clone, and I'm going to come back to commands here, and I'm going here to copy the HTTPS URL, web URL, copy it. I'll come back here and I'll paste that and press enter. So now I should have the folder here, and now we can see the directory Azure commands. So let's change directory into it. Let's go into it and list. We can see there is a folder called bash, and if we come here we can see the bash cmd folder, and if we click on it we expect to see this. So I'm going to do the same. I'm going to list and bash, so I'm going to cd into bash, and let me list that. Oops, sorry, let me list that. And now we can see we have the default and app gateway, and we need to go into deploy app gateway folder to access our command files, bash command files. So I'm going to cd into deploy app gateway, and let's list again. And now we can see we have all our bash files. And what we're going to do next is we want to create virtual network with 2 subnets. Are going to use the AZ command, and we'll go to the network, and then we'll look for the VNet, that's the virtual network, which we'll need to create, and we'll specify the name of the virtual network, which will be VNet lab 22, and address prefixes, which will be the address range of our virtual network, as we have in our lab here. That's over here, address range of our virtual network. Then we are going to put that into the resource group lab 22, and location is East US, and network security group, we'll just leave it empty, and we are going to create a new subnet along with the virtual network, a new subnet inside the virtual network, which we will call the application gateway subnet, which is exactly what we have here. And then we're going to create the subnet prefixes for the application gateway subnet, which is the range of IP address that will be issued to devices in the subnet, which is what we have there. And next we're going to create a new subnet, and we'll use the same command, AZ network, which is the main command. Then we have the sub command VNet, then we creating this time not just the VNet, this time we're creating the subnet inside the VNet, and that's why we have create, and the name would be backend subnet, which is exactly what we have here, where our servers are going to be located. And we have the address prefixes, which is going to be the address IP range of our devices in the subnet. And then we have the virtual network name, which is going to be VNet Lab 22. We'll place that also within the same resource group, and the network security group will just leave that empty. So let's run this, and we need to find the file which has to do with creating virtual network with 2 subnets, and that file I have it here as create vnet.sh, and if I click on it to see, is exactly what we just have there. Let me just go back. So I'm going to come back here, and we can see the file somewhere here. Yes, create vnet.sh. So what we will do to run it is we'll type bash create vnet.sh and press enter, and it will just take some time to create the virtual network with our subnets, and we can see it's currently doing that, and now it's completed. So if we want to check that out, let me just go back here. We can see we can list the virtual networks, and we can also list the subnets. So let's list the virtual network, then we'll come down to list the subnets. So I'm going to just say AZ, and we want it ordered table. And now we can see the virtual network lab 22 has been created, and we can see number of subnets. It has 2 subnets, and we can see the IP address range just as we have here. So we've created this. So next, let's just check out the subnets. So say AZ network vnet, and inside the vnet we want to see the subnets. Then we need to specify the dependencies. So the subnet depends on the virtual network, so we'll have to specify vnet name, and we know it's going to be a virtual network lab 22, and our virtual network depends on the resource group where it's located. So we're going to specify that, so we can just use -g, and we'll just say rg lab 22. That's where the resource group is located, and we want this ordered in table. Enter. And now it gives us an error because we didn't specify list. We need to list it. So go back, and just after subnet, before we specify our dependencies, we're going to put in list. And now we can see that we have our backend subnet created, and we also have the application gateway subnet created, and we can see the IP address range for the 2 of them just exactly as we have here. So next we need to create the virtual machines, the servers, and later we'll now create the application gateway. So how do we do that? Let's go back to the GitHub repository, and now we can see our next command would be to create a network security group for VM1. So the VM1 will depend on our network security rules, which will be inside the network security group. So the command to do that is AZ network. Definitely this is the major command, and within it we have a sub command network security group, and then create. That's the action, create. So we're going to create the network security group for VM1 to be named NSG VM1, will be in the same resource group and the same location. So let's do that. So to run that, we need to come here, and we can see create network security group VM1. So that's what we're going to run. And let's list again. And where do we have that? I'm going to specify bash create nsg vm1.sh. So it's creating the network security group for VM1, and it's been successful. So we've been able to get that done. And we can also list that that's Azure network command nsg, then just list, and we only need to specify the resource group. And let's just copy that, come back here and paste, enter, and now we can see our network security group nsg vm1 created for our virtual machine 1. So next we need to create the network security group rule, allow HTTP inbound for nsg vm1. So we need to create these two rules. One is for HTTP inbound, the other is for SSH inbound, and the idea is so that we can have access to through the HTTP port and the SSH port to the virtual machine. So we'll say AZ network nsg rule, which is the command, then the action is create, and we'll specify the name as allow HTTP inbound. The NSG name which the rule is going to be created in is NSG VM1, which we created earlier. The resource group is RGLab22, protocol TCP, direction is inbound, source address prefixes, there's meant to be a star here, but I don't know why we don't have that here. Source port ranges, star, which means all, so from all addresses and from all ports it will accept. So it will accept from all addresses and all ports. Then destination address prefixes, that's the virtual network, and that means that the destination virtual machine will be in the same virtual network, and the destination port ranges, that's the HTTP 80, and access allow and priority is 200. So let's look for the file, because we're meant to have star here, so let me just be sure I have that in the file. So create network security group rule for VM1. Let's go up, create network security group rules for VM1. So let me click on that, and yes, this is what it's meant to be. I have the star here and star, so maybe it's from the markdown text. Probably I omitted that out, so that's this how it's meant to look like. So let me run that here. So I'm going to list again, and what we want is create network security group rules for VM1. So bash create nsg rules for VM1.sh. So it's creating the two rules. So it's done the first one, it's creating the second one, and now it's completed. So it's created these two rules. So list custom network security group rules. So let's just copy that. That's just NSD rule list. Then we have to specify the dependencies, definitely the NSG name where the rule will be stored in, and then the resource group. So we'll copy that, come here, paste, and let's run that. And now we can see the two rules that have been created for the virtual machine. We can see allow HTTP inbound and allow SSH inbound that has been created. So next we now need to create the virtual machine, that's VM1, and we can see the command AZ-VM major, which is the major command, and create is the action, and the name of the VM will be VM1. Resource group, the same. The admin username we specify here, the admin password specify here. The image is going to be a Linux image, and the virtual network name is the one where they will be hosted in, that's this. And the subnet is going to be the backend subnet, which is here, because this is the virtual machine we're creating. And the NSG, that's the network security group, which has all the network security group rules for VM1, will be NSG VM1. And we didn't specify the nick, but it's going to create that automatically for us. So let's look for that, create virtual machine. That's it, create VM1. So go back to Azure and let's list again. So want to say bash and create vm1.sh. Where is that? Create vm1, yes. So enter. And it's creating our virtual machine 1 for us. And now we have the virtual machine created. So let's just confirm that. That'll be AZ-VM list, and resource group will be RG lab 22, and we want that ordered table. And we can see the virtual machine created. So next we need to install Apache Web Service in the virtual machine VM1. So we want to show our my profile, that's the my profile app.git, is stored in my GitHub repository. So let me just come back here and my repos, and we can see my profile app here, and let me just open that, and I believe Replit should be able to show me what it should look like here. So my index file run, and that's what we have here. So that's my profile. So Replit is connected to my GitHub account, and that's why it was able to download this, and we can view it from here. So what this means is we're going to create the virtual machine extension, and we'll set that. That means we'll set the publisher name, and the version, we'll name it as custom script, so that's the name of our extension. And the virtual machine where it will be stored is VM1, and the resource group, then the settings we're going to command to execute, and we're going to update the operating system, that's the Linux operating system, and we're also going to set up Aperture 2, that's the Aperture web server service, and then we're going to remove the Aperture folder part, file part, that's for the HTML. So what this meant is remove, and we're removing the folder forcefully, the folders forcefully, and this is the part, all these folders will be removed. And then we're going to place in there a copied clone from this repository, which is going to be our my profile app, and I'm going to specify the location as the inside the HTML. This is the new part, so it's going to be placed inside HTML. So I just clicked on that, and now it has opened our my profile app repository. So let me just go back. So that's just what it means. So that once we have access to the virtual machine, and since the Apache default web page is going to be from this HTML folder, it will show my profile app. So let's do that, and I'm going to list. And what do we want to do? We want to create the extension, or install this time. So we install Apache VM1. So bash install vm1.sh. Completed the installation of the Aperture web service, and also of my profile application. So let's see that. I'm going to minimize this, and let's come back and see all resources. And now we can see some of the resources we've created, and we can see that of the virtual machine one. So we're going to click on VM1, and let's go to the IP address, copy that, and I want to view that, so paste and go. And now we can see my profile has been set up successfully, and can see everything is working fine. So I'll close that, and let me just check the networking, and we can see the network interface card that was created automatically for me, and the public IP address with the private IP address that falls within the subnet range for the backend subnet. And we can see the SSH and HTTP rules that we created to allow access, and basically every other thing is working fine here in our virtual machine. So I want to go back to this, and let me list again, but let me come back to see our next task. And now we need to create a network security group for VM2. So we've moved on to VM2. That's this, the images web server. So we'll create network security group, and it's basically the same thing. And network security group create the name of the network security group, resource group, and the location. So we're going to say bash create nsg vm2 this time .sh, right? Yeah, and that has been created. So let's move on to the next. We need to create a network security group rules for VM2. That's the two of them, HTTP and SSH, and it's just the same like we did for the VM1. We're creating port 80 for HTTP and port 22 for SSH, and we can see the same name is SSH inbound and allow HTTP inbound, and it's just very similar to that of the VM1. So let's go back and let's list again, and I'm going to say bash create nsg rules, this time for vm2.sh. So it's creating them. It's just created the first one for allow HTTP inbound, and now it's created the second one. So next we need to now create the virtual machine 2. As we can see here, the name of the virtual machine is fine, the credentials, the image, the virtual network name, the subnets, the same one, BE, that's backend 2. So it's going to be here, that's this. And the NSG we created is also going to be NSG VM2. So we'll come back here and let's list again. So slash create vm2.sh. and now it's created the virtual machine 2. So let's just confirm that from the portal or resources, and here we can see virtual machine 2 has been created. So next we need to install the Aperture web service in virtual machine 2, which will be our project's images web server. So it's the same thing. We install the extension, and then this time we say command to execute. That's update the software operating system, and we're installing Aperture, and we're removing the entire folder, Aperture folder, for our HTML file, and this time we're placing the my project's images repository from GitHub, and we'll place that into the Aperture default folder, that is HTML, which we'll create. But this time we are also going to make a new directory added to that, so a new child directory called images, and that's where we'll place this repository. So the idea is that when we have the default IP address or domain name, then we include the /images to our path. That means we want to go into a folder images in that default Aperture folder path. So once we do that, we place the repository in there. So what it means is that once we put /images, we should be able to see our application running. So let me just click on this so that we'll see exactly what's inside here. And what I just did was I just put a default index.html file, just a static file, and I just said this is my images server. So in my replit is the same thing I have here, my project images, and I hope my replit will be able to show that. So run, and we can see this is my images server. So this is what we're expecting to see. So I'm going to install that for VM2. So I'll come back here. So what I want to do now is to bash, and we want to install that for VM2. So install VM2, Aperture VM2. So our application has been installed, so let's go and confirm that. So back to VM2, and let me copy the IP address, and let's see. Now we can see we need to have the path as images from the default path, so that's why we have the folder images. So if we click on that, we can see the path now, which is the IP, and images should give us this is my images server. So next we need to create the network security group for virtual machine 3, which is just the same thing, and it's NSG VM3. So we'll come back and go back to the terminal, and we'll list again, and now we have to type in bash create NSG VM3.sh, and that's been created. And next we have to create the network security group rules for NSG VM3. That's the two of them. So come back here, list, and bash create NSG rules for VM3 message. So it's created the first rule, and now it's created the second rule. So that one has been successfully done. So next we now need to create our virtual machine VM3, which will be our project's videos web server, and it's basically the same thing. So going to come back here and list again, and I'm going to say bash and create vm3.sh, and that has been done. So let's go on. So finally we need to just install the Aperture web service for VM3. That's our videos web server, and it's the same thing. We're updating the software operating system, and we're installing Aperture 2. We're removing the path for all the folders, and then we are cloning our my project videos GitHub repository, and we're placing it in this new path, but this time with the videos folder. So let's just see that, and my videos, and let's just see what we have there. It's just a text. This is my video server. So that's what we're expecting to see. So let's come back here, and I'm going to run that bash create install this time. Install Apache VM3sh. And now we've successfully installed that. So let's go and check that. And that's VM3. So we'll go to virtual machines, and we have our VM3 here. So click on that, and we have the public IP address copied. And let's come back here and paste and go. And now it should give us that with the folder videos, and inside it we should have our text. This is my video server. So this is where we'll place the video web page for my profile. So we've completed that, and we've been able to create the 3 virtual machines inside the backend subnet. We created the virtual network, and we also created the application gateway subnet. So next we need to create the application gateway, and we need to connect to the front end IP, that's the application gateway PIP, and the backend servers. Then we'll now specify the application gateway rules, routing rules, to determine how our packets will be sent to the servers based on the paths that is typed in on the URL. So let's do that. So we're going to type in here application gateways, select that, and we need to create one. You can click here or here, and we need to specify the resource group. So exactly what we've been using, RGLab22. The application gateway name, we'll just call this AG lab 22, and we put it in the same region, it's US. Tier will take standard v2 because we don't want to use the firewall, so standard v2, that's fine, and every other thing is fine. Our virtual network will be that which we've been using already, because that's where our application gateway will be based in the virtual network. And next we need to move to the front end, and we're going to have the public IP, and we currently have that for the virtual machines, as you can see here, but we need to create the new one, which will be called application gateway public IP. So our new application gateway PIP. Okay, and next we are going to set up the backend pools. So add backend pool, and I'm going to call this backend for default now. For default, it is going to be a default bucket pool, and the target is going to be a virtual machine, and the virtual machine will be our virtual machine 1. That's the nick for the virtual machine 1. So that's going to be the default, as we have here, default path. So I'll add that, and we have that here. So let's add that for our images. So backend pool for images, and same thing, specifying a server machine, and it will be our VM2 as we have here for images. Add, and we need to add for videos. So backend pool for videos, right? Like we have in videos here, and we'll choose virtual machine, and it's going to be VM3. Add. So now we've set our targets for our backend pools which we created. So it means any traffic going to backend pool default should go to VM1, any for backend pool images should go to VM2, and any for backend pool video should go to VM3. And we'll use the path to determine which of these backend pools will be selected. So next, that's what we need to do next to configure that. So we have our front end IP address, that's AGPIP. We have the backend pools created for the backend servers. So now we need to create a routing path rule, and I'm going to call this RR, which is routing rule for lab 22. And the listener, we're just going to call it listener lab 22. Front-end IP will be public IP, HTTP, port 80, listener type basic, and error no. So let's create the backend targets. So by default, we choose our backend pool default, and HTTP certain we have none, so we need to create that. So we'll just call this HTTP settings lab 22, and the same thing is fine. No, we disable cookie based affinity. That's fine, so add that. So that's what we have here. So now this is where we'll define our path-based routing. So by default it goes to the backend pool default, but here we need to specify that if we have in the URL slash images, it should go to the backend pool images, and slash videos should go to backend pool videos. So let's add that, and you can see the paths here, backend pool. So we're going to say slash images, the name of my application, so that'll be my project images, and we'll use the HTTP settings, and the backend targets would be images, so it's going to the images server. So add that, and that's what we have here. So add the next one, which would, the path will be slash videos, so anything going to videos part. Target name will be name of my app, my projects videos, and use the same HTTP settings, and this time backend pool videos, so it's going to the backend pool videos. So that's done, and we'll add that, and now we have our routing rule setup. So this is complete, and next tags, next review and create, and then we create. So we just allowed that to be created, and deployment is in progress. So what we've done is now we created the application gateway, and we specified the front end with the AGP, and we also specified the back end, but we specified it as backend pools. So we specified a default backend pool, images backend pool, and videos backend pool. So we also created rules in application gateway, which are path rules to determine um, based on the URL path where which of the pools the packet should go to and the request should go to, and we specified if it's images that is in the path, then it should go to the images backend pool, and if it's in the videos, it should go to the videos backend pool. But if it's default, that means there isn't any slash folder in there in the path, then it should go directly to the default web server. That's what we're going to test to see that it's working. So let's just wait for the application gateway to be created with the rules, and then we test. Our deployment has been successful, so our application gateway has been created. So let's test this and see. So we'll go back to the application gateway and application gateway, and we want to have access to the public IP address, and that's what we have here. So copy that, and if we go to the public IP, we should be able to get our profile application. That's the default application. And but if I type in images, it should give me this is my images server, and if I change that to the video part, videos, it should give me this is my video server. So we can confirm that our application gateway is working, and now through the path it determines how the packets, where the packet is sent to, which server the packet is sent to.